So let me just set the stage for this topic in the light of the EU integration process of the Western Balkans. So on the one hand, we have the Commission's President Juncker's no further enlargement, at least until 2020. In a way, this was strange to say because none of the candidate countries in the Western Balkans would anyway have managed to finish the negotiations for becoming a member of the European Union by this time. On the other hand, we have the German Chancellor Merkel's governmental initiative. So this is not the EU, not an official EU initiative, but it's a governmental initiative, the so-called Berlin process. And this aims to prepare the Western Balkan countries for future EU membership. And in this respect, there was in August 2014 a conference in Berlin, and there was a follow-up summit in August last year in Vienna, and in summer of this year there will be a next conference in Paris. In Vienna, the heads of the Western Balkans agreed on a list of regional transport and energy priority projects. And from the side of the European Union, we have modest so-called IPA II funds for co-financing over the period 2015-2020 in the range of about 1 billion euros. Now, if we put this into a context and compare, for instance, to the EU member country Romania, which has a similar population size as the Western Balkans have, for Romania, EU co-financing funds earmarked 6 times more in this area of transport and energy infrastructure for basically the same period of time. Now, the Vienna Institute for International Economic Studies is very proud that in a way we have been part of the Berlin process by producing recently 2 studies, the one on improving competitiveness in the Western Balkans for the German Ministry of Finance, and the other one on infrastructure investment in the Western Balkans for the Austrian Ministry of Science, Research and Economy. And the following slides will basically refer to some of the main results of these 2 studies. As you might know, the countries in the Western Balkans have either a low or a very low level of development, especially if you compare it to its peers which are already members of the European Union. So we have here in this figure the GDP per capita in euro at purchasing power parities, and we have in the upper part 2 comparator regions. So 5 Central and Eastern European member states of the Union, which are Poland, Czech Republic, Slovakia, Hungary, and Slovenia, and 3 Southeast European member countries of the region, so Bulgaria, Romania, and Croatia. And we compare here always 2005 as a kind of normal year before the outbreak of the global financial crisis with the figures, most recent figures, in this case 2015. And we can see that these countries in the region have, although they had some growth, the relative distance to its peers has not declined, and they have somewhere around half of the income level. This is connected with structural mass unemployment. Also here we can see that from 2005 to 2015 there has been some improvement, but most of these countries have still unemployment rates in some double-digit order. And for those countries where unemployment was reduced, this came to a large extent via outward migration and much less due to rising employment. And one has to say that, as it was also already mentioned by Gabor before, the Western Balkan economies have still huge trade deficits, and that hints at the lack of competitiveness. Again, there has been an improvement as compared to before the crisis outbreak, but the trade deficits here, balance of goods and services in percent of GDP, are still in the double-digit range, while the comparator regions have basically managed to have balanced or surplus in this respect. And again, it is to a less extent an increase of exports, but to a large extent a contraction of consumption and hence a reduction in imports, which has led to a certain improvement in the trade balance. One reason for a lack of a strong export capacity is certainly also that the Western Balkans are not really part of this Central European mechanical engineering automotive cluster, which basically ranges from Germany in the northwest to Romania in the southeast, with Czech Republic, Slovakia, Hungary basically being the core countries. And here we can see the share of the so-called SITC Group 7, which is machinery and transport equipment, in percent of total goods exports. And these are very low levels. Maybe the cases of, in case of Macedonia and Serbia, we see a certain improvement. This is connected to FDI. So for instance, in Serbia, as you might know, there is this Fiat production of Fiat 500. But even given this, we are at levels in the one digit or up to 30% of total exports. And if you compare this to the Central European member states, they are around, they have exports in this type of goods category of around 50%. So the first study we conducted, as I mentioned, commissioned by the German Ministry of Finance, they wanted from us also some policy recommendations, and basically they said, well, these policies should be quickly implemented and they shouldn't cost a lot. So this was what the German Finance Ministry was interested in, and so I just present now two of those policy recommendations. One of them is fiscal devaluation. It should be possible to implement it overnight, and basically it shouldn't cost even anything. It could be budget neutral. What is the basic idea of fiscal devaluation? It should be a short-run price competitiveness support, and to a certain extent, some of the countries in the region have already, probably unconsciously, conducted steps in this direction. So for instance, Montenegro, you have here the figures for the change of statutory tax rates, in yellow the VAT tax rate, and in blue the employer social security contribution. And you basically see Montenegro increased VAT. That should act like, in a way, a tariff. It should reduce consumption, especially also of imports. And on the other hand, it reduced the employer's contributions to social security. That should act like a subsidy in a way. And the hope is that then the firms would increase production and increase especially exports. Yeah? And that should have an effect, at least in the short run, which should be similar to a nominal exchange rate devaluation. While we know that most of these countries don't have any more exchange rate policy or have taken over outright the euro, that would be an alternative. And we can see that also the other countries have at least increased maybe the VAT or reduced employers' contributions to social security. Here in the box, there is an information about a simulation we conducted in the study. What if all the countries do a coordinated policy change in the direction of fiscal devaluation in the magnitude of 1% of gross value added increase in the VAT, and the same 1% of gross value added a decrease in the employer's social security contribution, so budget neutral. That would correspond to approximately 0.5 percentage point higher VAT rate and 2 percentage points lower social security contribution rates. So that's not a huge change, I would say, but still that would yield in our simulation analysis a trade balance improvement of almost a percentage point of gross value added, and only a slight output increase of around 0.2 percentage of gross value added. But if you think this by a factor of 5 or 10, that would be a substantial fiscal devaluation, then these effects are actually quite substantial. The other short-run policy recommendation we made was non-performing loans resolution. Basically, the idea is if you reduce non-performing loans, the hope is that banks would again have more space to provide credit to the firm sector. Also, the firm sector itself would be restructured in that case. And here in the figure we see the share of the non-performing loans in total gross loans. And obviously, after the outbreak of the global financial crisis, there was a huge increase in these shares, and we are still somewhere in the double-digit range of non-performing loan shares. There's somewhat a leveling off and improvement in the most recent period. So the policy recommendation included asset quality reviews by international standards, certain unified definitions, take over of the evolving European standards in this respect, creating incentives for banks basically to support non-performing loans resolution and not wait just for the government to basically bail out firms, which in some countries was the situation so far. Okay, but there is not only the short run, there are not only policies which do not cost anything or not a lot. There are much bigger fundamental problems at stake in the Western Balkans, and here this is my favorite map, which shows the very slow trickle-down effect of the Industrial Revolution. This indicates here the year a country surpassed the level of $2,000 in GDP per capita in international 1990 prices. And you can see the motherland of the Industrial Revolution, the United Kingdom, reached this level in around 1800, and then there was like the shape of an onion. Development evolved over the European continent, first in the Netherlands, Belgium, Germany, France, and so on. And the last region that was reached by these blessings was the Western Balkans, and probably Kosovo was the very last country, only in 2002 reaching this level of economic development. So there is some pessimistic, deterministic element here, but we see a similar picture if we look at the development of the railways, which is an example for large-scale infrastructure investment. Again, one could argue in which way does causality run. Probably it runs in both ways. We would, and also the literature would argue that certainly it runs in the direction of more infrastructure investment, also at least in the longer perspective, higher growth rates. And we see the same pattern as before. The UK first built a railway line in 1830, and the Western Balkans, for instance, only in the mid-20th century, in the mid-19th century, and Albania, I think it was only 1917, if I'm correct, yeah. But moreover, these countries were not only latecomers in the production of infrastructure, but if you look at the core network of railway as an example of large-scale infrastructure in Europe, this region here in the yellow rectangle, the Western Balkans, they have also created only a very low density of this network. Yeah? So there is still scope for investment in proper infrastructure in this region, which should contribute to higher long-term growth. And so this was the second study we conducted for the Austrian Ministry of Economy, focusing on projects in infrastructure, looking at which of those projects are mature, which can be implemented soon, and with the help of also the CETO agency that evaluates Western Balkans investment projects, we came up with basically this list of about 200 kilometers of mature new priority road building projects around 3 billion euros, the same amount of rail building projects and also several mature priority rail renovation projects. There are also some substantial gas pipeline and LNG port projects in the Western Balkans. Overall, the European Commission has evaluated that there is something like a 7.7 billion investment volume for the transport infrastructure in the Western Balkans. This was also discussed at the Vienna summit last August, and based on this package, the Vienna Institute estimated for an assumed period of about 15 years of basically building this infrastructure, an additional gross national product impulse of about 1% per year as a result of this quite substantial investment. And we also looked at potential employment effects, and that was estimated at around 200,000 persons, which is about 4% of the workforce. So there you can see how important, approximately in relative terms, this project would be for the region. Okay, so let me conclude. The Western Balkans are a region with a substantial economic catch-up potential, to put it mildly. The region faces structural underdevelopment and low competitiveness, which impede the catch-up process. Short-run policy measures include, for instance, fiscal devaluation and non-performing loans resolution to foster cost competitiveness in private investment, but a substantial, so to say, big push in infrastructure investment is imperative for a long-run prosperity of the countries in the Western Balkans. Thank you very much.